Well, this was supposed to be the big day. This was supposed to be the day that there would be a final agreement between Palestinians and Israelis. This was supposed to be the time when peace would fill the Middle East. However, it's not quite happening today. So let's do a quick review here. Where have we been? What's this really all about? What's going on here? Well, President Obama, during his campaign to become president way back in 2007, 2008, had promised that he would not wait till the last year of his presidency to attempt to get peace in the Middle East. After all, George W. Bush had done that. Bill Clinton had done that. Obama said that the very first year of his administration, he would attempt to get peace in the Middle East. And he lived up to his promise. He appointed former Senator George Mitchell, who had negotiated the peace deal between the Catholics and the Protestants in Northern Ireland, which was considered a tremendous achievement. He appointed him to be special envoy to the Middle East to try to get the deal done. Well, the first 2 years of his administration, Mitchell tried everything. Nothing worked. Finally, Mitchell resigned in disgust. President Obama left it there for the next 2 years. Not much was said about the Middle East from then on for the last 2 years of his first term. However, when reelected and when he began his second term, the first place he went to was to the nation of Israel. He made a speech there at the International Jerusalem Convention Center before mostly young people, mostly students, and he challenged them to get peace in the Middle East. Then newly appointed Secretary John Kerry immediately started his drive toward a peace. Now, Mahmoud Abbas did not want to come back to the table. He felt like he could get better results by going to the United Nations and let it become Israel against the world instead of the Palestinians against Israel. However, Kerry and Obama were having none of it. They put tremendous pressure on. And so finally, Abbas said, well, how long are we going to do this? Are we going to string this out forever? And Kerry promised, give me 9 months. So finally, the deal was struck on July the 30th of 2013. And Kerry said, I believe we can get a final agreement in 9 months. That made the deadline today, April 29, 2014. So what happened during this time? Kerry had asked the participants to conduct the negotiations in secret. He said, if we have a press conference after every negotiating session, it won't be long until they divide up sides and it'll be debated in every media, every paper, and we'll never get there. So he encouraged the parties, the Israelis, the Palestinians, and he asked them, just keep silence. If there's anything to be said publicly, let me say it. That way we'll get a consistent voice. We won't be involved in all this wrangling, all this debate. So that's what happened. And we haven't known a lot of what was going on behind closed doors from then until now. All we knew was that the parties were meeting right along, and some of them said nothing's being done. Others of them said real progress is being made. I guess it was depending on whether you were a pessimist or an optimist. Nevertheless, as we neared the deadline, Kerry tried to put together a framework agreement that could bring the concerns of both sides into play. Israel accepted the framework agreement. However, the Palestinians did not accept the framework agreement. So finally, Kerry just kept the framework quiet, secret, and never did actually put it on the table. They continued to try to get the deal done, continue to try to get Israel to do certain things, the Palestinians to do certain things. Now, part of the deal was that in order to keep progress at the negotiating table, every quarter Israel would release a certain number of prisoners. It worked out to about 26 prisoners per time, and so every time Israel did it, even though there was a lot of grumbling among Israel's politicians, they didn't like the fact that people who had actually committed murder had killed Israelis. were being let go just to keep the Palestinians at the peace table. Nevertheless, a deal was a deal. Netanyahu kept the deal, and they released 3 different groups of prisoners. Well, it was time for the last group of prisoners, and by this time, Abbas was threatening to pull out of the talks because they were within 1 month of the end of the talks. It appeared no progress was being made, at least progress as defined by Mahmoud Abbas. And so they said, we're not extending the talks. Kerry was requesting an extension of the talks. Israel was willing to extend the talks, but Mahmoud Abbas said, we're not extending the talks. Well, Israel said, well, if you're not extending the talks, why are we releasing these prisoners then? So the prisoner release was delayed by about 4 days. And during that time, there were discussions going on about the extension of the talks, plus there was going to be a release of those, I think, 26 more prisoners, plus an agreement to release 400 more prisoners without blood on their hands if the Palestinians would extend the talks. There was also going to be the release of Jonathan Pollard, the long-held Israeli spy from U.S. prison. He was going to be allowed to go home. So it looked like they were within days, maybe hours of a deal. However, all of a sudden, Abbas announced that he was applying for membership in 15 international organizations, which he had said he would not do during the peace talks as long as the peace talks were going. Well, he justified his action by saying, but Israel said they would release those prisoners and they delayed 4 days, and therefore I took these steps to join international organizations. Well, then, as they were trying to get a deal back together again, and it looked like that Netanyahu was ready to promise to stop building for the next 3 months and to negotiate borders during the next 3 months if the talks could be extended. All of a sudden, Mahmoud Abbas announced that the Fatah organization, that the Palestinians, led by the Fatah party, were going to reunite. We're going to form a reconciliation agreement with Hamas. Hamas is declared a terrorist organization by the United States, by the European Union, and by Israel. And all of a sudden, now then, the negotiating partner was forming a unity government with an entity who, in its very charter, vowed the annihilation of the nation of Israel. Netanyahu says, wait a minute. Obviously, Mahmoud Abbas does not want peace. He cannot expect us to negotiate with him if he's in a coalition government with Hamas. Hamas has fired 10,000 rockets into Israel over the last 10 years. This is ludicrous. So consequently, Israel announced they were pulling out of the peace talks. And the United States said, well, we can't really blame you because Hamas is a terrorist organization, and everything seemed to roll back downhill. However, Abbas said, wait a minute, we're still interested in negotiation, and Hamas is willing to renounce violence against Israel. Hamas is willing to recognize Israel's right to exist. Hamas is willing to accept previous deals that have been negotiated between Israel and the Palestinians. And all of a sudden, the United States ears perked up and said, well, if you're willing to do that, then perhaps the negotiations are simply on pause and not actually done. Well, even people out of the Israeli government said, well, if Hamas will renounce terrorism, if Hamas will recognize Israel's right to exist and will make a decision to abide by previous agreements that have been negotiated between Israel and the Palestinians, then why couldn't we negotiate with a unified government of Fatah and Hamas? Because it was a problem anyway, since we really need peace with both entities. Well, the thing has drug on until we have reached today. Now, there's quite a number of developments today. I want to take some time to lay this out for you, and we are going to be coming to the phones in a little while. But before we do that, I want to lay out some of the latest breaking developments. Now, keep in your mind, with all of this going on, there's going to be a peace deal. The Bible prophesies there's going to be a peace deal. The only question is when. It's obviously not going to be April the 29th of 2014. How quickly can it happen? I don't know that. Could it happen yet this year? Well, certainly it could. Will it? Again, I don't know that. But it is going to happen. And when it happens, if it creates a Palestinian state in Judea, if it allows for a Jewish minority to continue to live in Judea under the new Palestinian government, and number three, if it puts the Temple Mount under a sharing arrangement so that both Muslim and Jew can worship there, those are the three criteria I see from scriptures that will be necessary to fulfill the prophecy. If it does those things, then the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon will begin, and the second coming of Jesus Christ. So the final 7 years to Armageddon and to the second coming of Jesus to this earth will begin when they get that deal done. Can you imagine what it would have happened if it had in fact been completed today? I would be here on this microphone announcing to you that the final 7 years to the second coming of Jesus to this earth and to the Battle of Armageddon had just begun. Well, we're not announcing that today. However, I am announcing that it is coming. It is going to happen, period. Oh, by the way, we also have announced that when it does happen, within 30 days of the occurrence, Endtime Ministries will mail a magazine to every single home in Israel, letting them know that the final 7 years just began and what they should do about it. So that's where we are right now. Now, we're not mailing that today because the final 7 years have not begun. The budget to get this done is $1.8 million. We presently sit at $1,476,171.26. So as you can see, we haven't quite made our budget yet to do this. Perhaps God saw we couldn't make it and said, I'm going to give them a little more time. So if you're out there, you do continue to give, and I thank you for that, because we need to have this money in the bank. So all we have to do is pull the trigger, and this thing will happen, because it's going to have huge, I'm talking about the greatest prophetic fulfillment in the last 2,000 years. So if you'd like to give to it, the number to call is 1-800-INTIME. Just say, I want to give to the Israel Project. Thank you so much for your faithfulness to this point, and we'll be back to tell you more in just a moment.